Desk now to Catherine Viette, who's going to take us through the international front pages this hour. Thanks for joining us again, Catherine. Of course, the major headline this morning is, of course, this deal which has been struck by between the EU and Turkey over the migrant crisis. Front page news across the board.
That's right. We're going to take a look at some of the front pages of the Turkish papers who've been reporting on this. And we'll take a look at Zaman. And now that's the paper that was just taken over by the Turkish government. It was a leading opposition paper. Now it's sort of towing the party line of the Turkish government. So their headline says Turkey's demands for a green light from the EU. And it shows a photo of a very smiling, happy Turkish prime minister, and he's shaking hands with the president of the EU Parliament. The front page of Sabah features a family photo op of all the EU officials who were there, Brussels negotiating, along with the Turkish Prime Minister, of course, once again smiling because basically Turkey has had the upper hand in these negotiations. One of the things it's been asking for an additional 3 billion euros and no visas for its citizens to travel to Europe.
The British press, though, less enthusiastic, we could say, about the outcome of this.
Yes, the Independent's front page features a rather arresting photo. You see a little boy, he's trapped in barbed wire, and it goes along with the headline, refugees caught in middle as EU haggles. And that sort of sums up that headline quite nicely. The paper goes on to say that there are real fears that closing the Balkan route used by refugees could trigger violence. And inside the paper, they have a rather shocking cartoon. And this shows, actually, it's German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and she's dressed as like an EU border officer kicking Alan Kurdi. Remember, he was the little Syrian boy who drowned several months ago. He's tagged return to sender. And the paper here seeming to suggest that Merkel in part is responsible for the influx, welcoming them. So many migrants encouraged to take the dangerous crossing.
In the first place, yes. Well, the paper's also taking a closer look at this additional 3 billion euros that Turkey's asking for.
Yeah, that's sort of become rather controversial here. Now, the EU already had pledged to give Turkey 3 billion euros, and now this is an additional 3 billion that the Turkish government is asking for. Now, the money is supposed to be used to improve the living conditions of refugees in Turkey and ease the burden of any further arrivals or returnees. The Independent says now these talks are about pride and not money. Says that behind the smiles at the meeting, it was a tug of war over how to use this cash. And basically, Turkey wants the freedom to spend it through its own agencies, says it knows best where to spend the money, while the EU wants to manage it through their programs. And they've already announced that some of the funds are going to go through the World Food Program. So this money, again, supposed to keep those in Turkey happy enough to stay there. But the paper asks if Europe and Turkey can't agree on how best to support them, then the signs there aren't really all that good.
Well, the Guardian as well, they're weighing in on this story too.
Yeah, the Guardian calls this EU deal with Turkey a Faustian pact that may carry a devilishly high price tag. Says the Turkish Prime Minister has proved to be an unreliable and problematic partner since the Syrian crisis erupted. And the article goes on to list his increasingly authoritarian moves, like taking over the leading opposition paper, as I mentioned earlier, and calls the timing significant and says that, in effect, the Turkish Prime Minister is giving Brussels the finger on the eve of this summit.
The German media also not terribly happy with Turkish demands.
That's right. We're looking at Der Tagesspiegel here, and the headline there says that Turkey has surprised Europe, and it goes on to say that just 3 months ago, the EU and Turkey had agreed on an action plan for all of this and handling the refugee crisis, and now suddenly Turkey is making additional proposals and demands, and it all came as a surprise to negotiators, pushing those talks into overtime.
And well, let's finish up on something a bit more upbeat, shall we? Today, of course, International Women's Day. The press is reporting on how it's being celebrated. Tell us more.
Yes, Newsweek wants to remind all the readers that this festival of femininity, as the article calls it, dates back to 1909, and this is when women across America marched for better working conditions and voting rights. And then International Women's Day was born 2 years later after German socialist Louise Zietz suggested a more global celebration. So now Newsweek has a wrap of some of the events that are going on. And surprisingly, March 8th is a recognized holiday in Russia and Vietnam, among some other countries. And well, in the U.S., Lakshmi Puri, the deputy director of the UN Women's, will ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange.
Oh, goodness.
And then Le Monde, unfortunately, takes a closer, serious look at working women and concludes that for the past 20 years, there's been no real progress for women in the workplace. It's quoting a report by the International Labor Organization, and it says that the global wage gap between men and women is estimated to be 23%. And it also says that women are overrepresented in the informal economy and the first to end up underemployed. And that says if these current trends continue, it's going to be 70 years before this difference disappears completely.
But we have a festival of femininity, so
That's
we
right.
should all
We
be
have a
very
festival
happy with that indeed. Thank you very much, Catherine Viette with the press review.